Hey, we got music. We got April music today. Hey, what's going on, y'all? It's your girl Tanisha Peoples live with my brothers in good trouble, Mr. Jason B. Allen and Mr. Nehemiah Frank, and we are the trio that talks that real shit every Monday. We also have our superstar activist student here with us, Miss Aisha M. Dukuly, and we got a Gen Z Takeover today. So let's kick it off, y'all, and talk about what happened over the weekend, if anything.
Cool. Well, nothing happened with me other than schoolwork.
Okay. Okay. Let's get into it's making national news, these mass shootings in various cities throughout the country. And somebody made a point of, the popularity or the conversation in mass shootings happening around, when they were shooting up, when predominantly white schools were getting shot up. But, this is something as Black people that we've known all our lives living in, crime-ridden areas. And I know that in Chicago, we've seen a number of mass shootings, including this past weekend. It was actually, it happened down the street from where I used to live. And this place, this stretch of like street is actually kind of like a mini kind of like Black Wall Street in itself. In Chicago, it's a stretch of Black businesses, entertainment, all that stuff. And you go to have a good time. And so for the past couple of weekends, people have been going out there, kicking it, in the streets, because it's still a pandemic. You can't really be outside like that. And the police, there's been good relations between the police and the community members. And all of a sudden, somebody comes up and just starts shooting into the crowd. So 13 people shot, one person killed, a mother with 3 children killed, 29 years old. And so this is what we're seeing across the country and in our cities. And this what's happening, y'all. Like, I can't put my hands on it. I don't know if it's, I just don't understand. What's y'all perspective on it, on these mass shootings in our communities?
I think it's a lot, right, that's taking place. It's trauma, it's, the lack of socialization skills. But we also have a crisis in our homes. A lot of this violence is happening. I was reading an article last week and talked with one of the police officers in the Police Athletic League here in Atlanta. And a lot of the calls that they're receiving, a lot of the incidents of violence are connected to domestic disputes. It's domestic violence, whether it's people in relationships, family members, people who live in the community. You walk by my house and threw something in my yard. So my first response is to pick up a gun and start shooting, or your car looked better than mine, or you look like you wanted to talk to my girl. Like, and I'm like, people still doing that? Like, so your first thing is to pick up a gun. But then the other reality is this has been a narrative that's been drawn in the media politically on policing Black people. This is a war against police brutality. So this is what the outcome is, that communities are being flooded with drugs. They're being flooded with illegal guns. And then it's like, okay, well, now we need to pay police more. We need more police in communities to clean up the violence and crime that's happening. But a lot of these things are being attributed to educational and economic inequities. So it's a lot to it. It's not just, people having a bad day. People are having a bad day for a reason. And we got to start addressing the reasons that the system is implemented.
But I want to direct this question to Aisha, because we're seeing it amongst a lot of our young people. And personally, honestly, I don't want to sound like a jerk for saying this, but I think it's something in the drugs. I ain't gonna lie. They've legalized weed. We seeing a lot of people, using marijuana nowadays. You don't really know what's in it, because even though they legalized it, ain't too many people going to the dispensary. They still going on the corners getting it from the weed man. And so I know that a few people in my family have had their weed lace, their, drinks, had stuff dropped in it, and it affected them, like long term. And so it's like, when you think about the effects of the drugs and how they are, as you said, Jason, like infiltrating our community, and we don't know what's in this stuff, is making people, is altering their mindsets to where, they either needed to cope, and it makes them emotional, it makes them maybe unstable, or it's just something that I just don't trust it. I don't trust it because I watched this documentary about how the CIA used drugs to control activists back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so I'm thinking about that effects, but also, why are people so angry to where we're seeing these shootings on the expressways, and that people shooting in mass crowds? So, and we're seeing it from young people. Aisha, can you speak to that?
I think everybody's between a rock and a hard place, like Jason was saying. There's too much going on. And I think in the Black community, mental health is stigmatized. I think something that my generation is trying to change is that stigmatization of mental health. To us, mental health is important. You want to make sure that your mental health is correct. There's a way that you communicate with people. I think family relationships are often strained and toxic, especially now they're in the house. Things are very, very toxic. And I think all of that combined with the stress and the financial strain, the drugs in the community, I don't have a place to live, I don't have anywhere to eat food, or anything like that. That's causing all this stress, and so people will just jump off at the drop of a hat when they can just de-escalate. I think that's why social emotional learning mental health is so important. And that's why my generation pushes so hard for that, and de-escalation techniques. And that's why I think that all of this is happening today.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And just, efforts to deny our communities of those supports, mental health supports, access to, whatever we need to have to find that balance. So that makes a lot of sense. So let's get into the conversation. But before we get into the conversation, y'all, we put on the banner or the flyer that we have a very special announcement today, which we do. But in order to catch the tea, you got to stay tuned in to the end of the show. We go drop this hot tea at the end of the show. But now we go get into this conversation about Gen Z Takeover, and we were supposed to have another guest on today. But another thing that we're seeing is that a lot of young people have to go to work to support their family. So our other guest here to do that, and she's unfortunately unable to be with us. But we still got, again, the dynamic Aisha Dukuly, and she's going to jump us into this Gen Z Takeover. So Aisha, tell us a little bit. How did you become an activist at such a young age?
Well, I kind of grew a passion for it when I was in middle school. Like growing up, like I think when you're little, you don't really see the world like as a racist place because you're little. You don't really understand. You just think, okay, well, this white person's having a bad day, and all white people aren't like that. My first best friend was the white boy that lived across the street from me, and my neighbors next door were racist, and so I didn't think that they're racist. But at that age, I couldn't identify as racism, so I didn't know it was racism. Then when I got to middle school, I started to see it, like my eyes opened a little bit, because my seventh grade teacher, a social studies teacher, it was her first time teaching black students of color, non-white students in America. She had only taught in Sweden, and she would always single us out. The whole class would be talking, and she would single somebody else, call their name, not even when they're talking, and like then she was, oh yeah, you're not talking. It happened to me, and as my eyes started opening a little bit, and then I started to see everywhere. My cousin started getting in trouble with the police, and I saw how the police harasses and abuses black bodies, and so that's kind of how I got interested in it. Just talking to my friends and um, making them aware of the stuff going on. And then back in October, the Atlanta Coast Student Coalition was born. And that's how I kind of got into all this.
So tell us a little bit about the ESC and the work that you guys do and the other students that are part of the coalition, and tell us a little bit about that.
So we focus on creating better educational outcomes for Black and Brown students. That's through various ways, right? So stopping the school to jail pipeline, you can do that through representation. Recently, we've been working with Profound Gentlemen in Gwinnett County Public Schools to make that happen, to retain more Black and people color male educators to be representation for Black males, because that can really make a difference. And in Black girls as well, to keep them out of the school to jail pipeline. We also are working on currently IHPs, individual health plans. We're trying to promote that. That's especially now during the pandemic. It's very important that students have their IHPs up to date. I remember as somebody with an underlying illness, they don't really take it seriously. They just kind of sweep it under the rug. You have to advocate for yourself, and that shouldn't be the case. So we've been doing that, and our work is primarily focused in Metro Atlanta. So DeKalb, Gwinnett, Cobb, Clayton, Fulton, those counties. And so yeah, that's what we've been doing.
Cool. So, Jason, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I was smiling. You know how like parents smile when their kids are like on point, and it's like, yeah, Aisha and this group of students are simply amazing. I do want to add just one thing that they really have made a mark for themselves, not just in lifting their voices, but leading. They've led a couple of demonstrations here in the area. They've been engaged in voter engagement, getting their generation educated about voting, but also out, to the polls to actually vote and make a difference. And so one of our ESC members, Brian Dillard, is considering running for school board. He just graduated from Gwinnett County Schools and is definitely engaged and involved. So the ESC is building their leaders right now. So they're not waiting for somebody to pass the baton. They're learning from those willing to teach them. And I appreciate them about that.
No doubt, no doubt.
I just want to pop in here real fast. Like, Aisha, do you know how impressive you are? Like, I mean, every time I see you pop up on the screen, I'm like, what is she gonna? I'm like, as an adult, you're like, okay, what is this young person really gonna say? Like, are they really gonna contribute something meaningful to the conversation? But every time you say stuff, like, I swear you help me organize my thoughts on exactly what it is. And everything that you said about, like, I mean, you just described systemic racism, in every like little, part of society, mental health, the systemic ness of the school to prison pipeline. And for you to be that young and actually be, that woke, I hate that, woke is becoming a bad word or a phrase for people. I guess, well, I don't want to say like white folks think, polluted the word, but,
It kind of did. So
I just think that I'm just really proud of you and impressed. So I echo everything that Jason said.
Well, I think that comes from, like, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. But like, I think what the older generation gets is that, like, there's so much going on. Like, there's a lot going on right now that I don't think was going on when you guys were kids. And so it kind of forces you to grow up. You have to be aware of what's going on and things like that so that you don't get caught up.
Yeah. And it's, I think it really is a shame because as you mentioned, you have to grow, it grows you up faster so you don't get to experience a childhood. And so when we're talking about trauma, that contributes to trauma because you didn't get to experience life, and I think it really is a shame for our young people, and it's really not fair. And so that part of the activism is important too, because at the end of the day, you shouldn't have to be, or anybody else in the Atlanta Student Coalition shouldn't have to be in these streets fighting for your rights. Like, technically that's our job.
Right.
We're also supporting them, but we also understand that your voice is actually more important than ours because y'all are experiencing this every day. But at the same time, y'all as young people should not have to be out here fighting for your lives, for your education, for, whatever, especially considering the fact that white kids don't have to. And so we're seeing this is a problem, and it's more and more as we grow in generations, y'all are losing y'all childhood, and it breaks my heart. It really does break my heart.
Tanisha, I have to jump in. Everything that you said is spot on. So I'm over here looking at you, and on my screen, I don't know what anybody out there can see, but Aisha and Tanisha, they're at the top of the screen. And I'm just thinking about, like, here we have an older sister and this younger sister in the same movement, right? And then this weekend, we just had someone get hit by a vehicle. And then we have, little Aisha and these other folks out here protesting in the streets. Like, it could have been her that could have lost her life out there. And so they see the reason why they have to go out there. It's really sad. It really
I think it's important for us to remember that we have, spaces that young people are being able to lift their voices. That's why critical race theory is such a thing for the Atlanta Student Coalition. It took, Christina Guillen at Seven Pillars Career Academy, was like, listen, you just fought the state. You're not here full time. So what can we do to make sure you're still going to be connected to, I see something on the screen. I was like, that's so funny. What are we going to do to make sure you're connected with our young people? Because someone has to teach them how to be activists and leaders, and that's what the school is organized around. And so the Atlanta Student Coalition started with my middle school students, and they said, hey, we found a student here, and you know, these students are having issues with this, and we reached out to teachers. And so that's how it got started, with educational leaders thinking outside of the box. But if we have a society telling us that we can't discuss race in classrooms, if we can't, you know, allow for students to have a voice at the table, then we're never going to really solve the issues that this generation is having. And that's why we're seeing a lot of the crime and violence in, you know, our communities. Aisha and them have written articles about we need better workforce development, and how many of the local school boards have actually said, you know what, the kids are telling us what's wrong. What are we doing to fix it? And there's nothing being done to actually fix it.
But let's get in. Oh, I'm sorry, Aisha, go
nobody
ahead.
listens, when somebody can scream out and cry for help, and they do it respectfully, they do it, like, you know, kindly, calmly. When nobody listens to, then that's when you start throwing rocks, you start acting out, because it's just a cry for help. That's all it is.
So let's jump into, because Jason, you mentioned and Christina posted that, you know, 7 Pillars teaches critical race fact, not theory, but fact. And so let's talk about the reverse and kind of go into E's article. E was our other student leader that was supposed to join today. And she did a TikTok video that went viral, in which, you know, she ultimately got a racist teacher fired. And so we're battling or fighting on several layers. So it's the fact that y'all don't want to teach real, true history in classrooms. And then we have racist teachers in classrooms. And so let's get into the article a little bit, where, you know, basically we have these teachers that are racist. They're telling our kids that, you know, they're not smart. They're teaching them from a deficit-based position. How did that make y'all feel, particularly you, Aisha, as a student, that even though a teacher may not verbalize this, you feel it in some capacity? How does that make you feel? And how did this article make you feel?
Oh, it definitely makes you feel angry, like, because they're in a position of power, they're abusing the power. And if you go to somebody and say, hey, this is happening, because of so much red tape, they're not going to do anything about it. So you pretty much feel powerless and you feel angry. And then that's why we go to TikTok, because we know we go to TikTok or any type of social media, people are going to listen to us. It's going to gain traction, and then people will see what's really going on. I think that's why it's so great. I had the conversation we're having before the show. It's great because people can see, but then, you know, people just kind of see it, and the next week they're over with it. I think, you know, we can change that. But that's why I think social media is so important.
And how do you feel about the growing assaults on the teaching of critical race theory?
I don't like it. It's just basically what it is. Critical race theory is a toolkit to solve racism. And basically, like, even in colleges now, like, the school that I'm going to, we just wrote like a kind of like quick pre-essay on this, like trigger warnings. It's basically an excuse to say you can't teach anything that makes white people feel guilty about their racism or their white privilege, that makes white people have white guilt. You can't teach that, and you're not going to get anywhere if you don't fix racism. It's just it's another every other arguments against critical race theory is just to protect white people's feelings and make them feel comfortable.
And then they do it under the guise of like a race neutral bill, right? So they don't say not make white kids feel guilty. They just say no student should feel guilty. And we're like, well, we know the only ones that are going to feel guilty are the white students and the teachers. So like, just say it.
Yeah.
Hey,
like, right to the point.
That's that all lives matter language. That's what that is.
It's also like the need to control the narrative. And so we all know, you know, shout out to the Black Wall Street Times. That's going to be my first public service announcement. We have to support Black-owned media companies that are driving our stories and our narratives, because we too often are going to the major media companies and they're telling us what to think and what to believe. And so, you know, in order to get ahead of these conversations, we have to be in spaces where we're telling the stories.
Yeah. So I asked a question in the chat, and I want to hear from y'all. Like, what's been y'all experience? I feel like it's Black people coming through a racist educational system. Somebody has either told us or demonstrated to us in their interactions with us that we won't go be ish. Talk about that experience a little bit and how it maybe discouraged you or motivated you to prove them wrong.
That's good.
Well, first, when I was in like in kindergarten, like early at elementary school, I went to in a majority white school. Wow. And in the South, it's like that. There's like explicit racism. There's like subtle racism, like bless your heart type racism.
You just say, I remember,
yeah, that's what they do down here. And it's like they would always feel pity for me, but it wasn't pity like, oh, like I want to help. It's like pity like, oh, you can never be anything. And sitting here like today, I graduated high school with honors, 3.9 GPA, 16 out of like 435 students. I'm going to Wake Forest University on a full scholarship. It's like, yes, I proved you wrong. I am going to be something, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so it just is motivation for me. It's motivation for me.
Yeah, I love that. I was just going to say that actually I did not have that experience matriculating through my public schools, but also in Atlanta, it was very different. Like we knew where we were in Southwest Atlanta. We knew that our community schools, they were for us. They were in our communities. We were connected. Our high schools were like mini HBCUs. And so we were really empowered. Now, I will say this, I did see some of my classmates as I got older. Especially in middle school and high school, teachers, whether they were white, black, mixed race, brown, etc., so forth, would definitely tell them. It was the card the teachers would pull, right? Like, oh, you think you bad, but you can't spell, and you ain't never gonna be nothing, and you gonna be this, and you come from here, and all that kind of jazz. And so I did hear teachers, when they were fighting for their power and trying to gain back control of the classrooms, take jabs and shots at students, like, oh, you're not gonna be nothing. Oh, you can't spell, and kind of talking down to them in a way that made them feel less than who they truly are. And so it wasn't my experience, but I definitely realized that it goes beyond race. It's just the way that people view Black and brown students, period, that needs to be improved and fixed.
I definitely witnessed that growing up. I remember I had one teacher. It was a black lady, and there was like a lot of black students in the class, but this time I was at a majority minority elementary school. And she would always she would call somebody, she'd roast them and make the whole class laugh, embarrass them in front of the whole class. And now looking back at that, I see how that hurt their self-esteem. And if she hadn't done that or not, there was other teachers, doesn't matter what, he said, no, it doesn't matter the race, everybody, it's like a power. I think teachers all sometimes on a power, so they just want power, a power search, and they're power hungry. And a lot of times it's unhealthy, and they just demean students, and that's very detrimental to their future.
Yeah. Neo, did you have an experience you want to share?
Child, yes.
I know you got stories for days coming up.
I mean, first of all, I didn't really learn how to read until I was in the 5th grade, right? So I was already, on that school to prison pipeline, right? They were like, oh, he's in the 3rd grade and he can't read on level. But it was a white man that sat down with me after school and made sure that I got what I needed. But he was one of he was just one in hundreds of teachers that I had. And then I met another strong teacher in high school, and then another one I had in college. And college is I would say that's kind of where my activism came in. And I was in Chicago. I was in the Loop. I was at Harold Washington College in a sociology class. And the professor was just, oh my gosh, y'all, the way that he described the South Side of Chicago. I remember he said, we were talking about some indigenous group in a Papua New Guinea or something like that. And these are Black people, right? Papua New Guinea, these are Black looking people. They have the same hair as us, the same body structures, all of that. And I remember the professor said, the man would stay and they would play musical instruments while the women would go out and get food and hunt and all of that. And he said, they really don't I can't even remember exactly what it was, but he said something to the extent that, well, the village only needs one man, to populate the entire village. And then he said, can you say Cabrini Green? And that class, oh my gosh, flipped out on this man because he's teaching at a minority, school in the middle of the Loop in Chicago. You think you're going to get away with saying this mess?
Right.
And so I'm I wonder how many years had he been there trying to go under the radar and harming Black and brown students. So, I mean, after I was done with that man, y'all, his tenure, because he was tenured, he only had one class a semester. For a whole decade. I don't even know if he's still employed or not, but it was horrible. But that's just one incident. There was another incident when I was in an algebra class, and we had a sub. It was an old white man who was in the class. This was in Virginia. And I remember like I didn't learn about code switching or anything like that. So I was just talking like, and I had just come from DC public schools. We had moved from, like my dad was in the military. So I lived everywhere. But yeah, like I remember, you know, sitting in class, talking to the white kids as if they were black kids. You know, I was just talking how I talk with my cousins and my family. And I remember the professor say, son, you probably speak as worse as you write or something like that.
Wow.
Like that. And like all of the kids in the class, this was a majority white school, wealthy Fairfax County. I think the school district was like the 3rd ranking school district in the country. So lots of money, lots of affluence there. And I just remember my classmates were like giggling and laughing. And then, you know, I didn't quite understand what was happening. So I giggled and I laughed too. And then I went home and told my parents what happened. And man, they were so upset. And that was the day I had become silent. Like I stopped walking in the classroom. I stopped raising my hand. I stopped participating. I went silent. But that's also probably where the seeds of my activism were born, because I knew that was what he did.
But you know what's ironic about that? Nowadays, Black saying it's cool. It's cool if you're non-Black. It's cool to talk like an African American, and it really makes you upset because you don't even know where like AVE comes from. That's not like it's not to them. It's like a joke. It's cool. It's a trend. It comes because we were stolen and we had to learn English. That's not something to laugh at, and so it really makes me upset. It really grinds my gears. And like, oh, now you're racist. No, you're racist. Stop.
Man, y'all better catch this knowledge.
Yeah, no, I wanted to say this too. I could not like skip over the fact that Neil went from being a struggling reader to the editor-in-chief of the Black Wall Street Times. And everyone doesn't get that outcome, but it's important that we highlight that because too often, I'm going back to the beginning of our conversation, we don't realize that young people, especially Black and brown students, are in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, where these seeds of discord about how you learn, how you look, how you exist in our society are being sown, and parents don't even know. So can you imagine that? Like parents don't even know what's happening, and kids are suffering through this. And so luckily, you know, Neil has a story that says, you know, I made it through. But how many other kids didn't get that opportunity and are suffering in prisons?
And Jason, if I could just say this, if I would have had you as a teacher, I would have still founded the Black Wall Street Times. And I say that because it took strong Black teachers.
That's good.
To tell me to stay on my behind and be like, oh, you can do this. You know, I remember when I was in college and I was probably writing at a 9th grade level, maybe at that time. And that teacher, oh my gosh, man, LaRue Finney, she would not let me get away with nothing. I remember my capstone, I had finished, I think it was like 15 pages. And she was like, I've read this before. And like, I didn't lift it or anything like that, but she's like, you need to flex. You need to do something different. And she literally made me redo my entire capstone. Oh, I was so hot.
Wow.
And I didn't sleep for days afterwards because I was just working my behind off. But it was the best thing that could have happened to me because I believe that was where I built the stamina to be able to like write and edit and, you know, push the needle.
That's good.
To like the pen. So absolute Black teachers, they're everything. They are everything. We have to create a pipeline to get more of them. And shout out to El Mekki and his wonderful school of educators in Philadelphia.
Yeah, most definitely.
Let's get into how dynamic Black teachers are and just, you know, Black people in general. And I want to direct this to Jason because Jason actually started the Atlanta Student Coalition. So Jason, can you talk about like your motivation behind that, coming from being an educator and an activist and a Black man that needs to organize these students around these issues?
Yeah, most definitely. So it's actually the anniversary around things happening in Atlanta. Last year, the water boys became famous across the city and then the state and throughout the nation regarding selling waters on street corners. And it really spoke to the economic and educational inequities that are happening in cities like Atlanta across the nation. And one of the things that I noticed is that every time you turned on the news, it was like a negative story about these boys. Like, oh, they are causing crime to go up, and oh, they're aggressive, and oh, they're cussing you out, and oh, we need to get them off the streets and clean up our streets, right? And get back to a great Atlanta. And it was the way that the narrative was being framed around our youth. And I said to myself, well, dog, I was a water boy. Like, I was out there at Mosley Park, you know, selling waters, selling chips, selling whatever I needed to, because I knew that if I wanted to get a class ring, or if I wanted to go to Six Flags, or if I wanted to get those Jordans that my daddy was not going to buy, and he was not going to allow me to illegally get them, that I needed to hustle up some money to get the shoes. And there were a lot of youth that were going to do that. And so everyone has something to say about young people, parents, school board leaders, teachers, you know, retired teachers, politicians, business, community, but no one was actually listening to students. And I said, well, you know, Ms. Guillen, I'm going to take a risk and be like, I'm going to start doing this in the mentoring group. And it started with young Black boys, and then started creating a space with them on Atlanta. And then it eventually grew into a class on teaching social justice and activism through journalism at Seven Pillars Career Academy. And then it was the Atlanta Student Coalition. And we just continue lifting student voices. We showed up in spaces where people would say students don't belong here. Teachers shouldn't be doing this. No one wants to hear what these youth have to say because they're the problem. And so we started changing the narrative and letting people know that youth are not the problem, they're the solution, and we need to listen to them.
Dopeness. And
it's really like the adults being the problem, right? Because we're not listening to them. Like, that's where the breakdown is.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. So Aisha, kind of building off of that, talk about the significance of the investment or the support from an older person in youth activism, because similar to how we feel as activists as adults, we feel alone in this, right? And so just imagine being a young person and maybe not feeling like you're getting the support to be a voice, or you have the space to be a voice. So talk about how the creation of the Atlanta Student Coalition, and particularly the support that you guys got and still get from Jason, how that helps you in student activism.
I think that's great. So you like how little kids are so innocent. They don't lie. They don't sugarcoat things. They say it like being straight up. Gen Z is doing that, but because we're young, nobody's listening to us. And so I think by having adults back us, we're giving it to you blunt. We're not sugarcoating it. So you're getting the truth. But then we have an adult backing us, and so now we're credible. And so I think it's a very, very great thing that Jason is doing, and I hope that it continues. Just up, and it comes national, not just in the K through 12, but in colleges. There's so much stuff that work that needs to be done in colleges. Historically racist institutions that are built to keep out Black and brown people and women. So much more to do.
Yeah. Oh, I have a public service announcement. I have a couple of them today, but Brian Dillard, Aisha are both leaders. They just graduated from high school. And so we were like, well, what can we do to make sure that we keep the work going? And the mission of the Atlanta Student Coalition is to empower youth to lead. And so Aisha and Brian are associate directors of the Atlanta Student Coalition, and really building a pipeline of leaders so that students will start to see them. And I always tell my students that are in my classes at Seven Pillars that, you know, I'm Professor Xavier of education, right? Not the whole wheelchair, because somebody mentioned that. And I was like, see, you missed the whole point and power of Professor Xavier. But I want to be able to provide a platform for them to be able to learn how to do what needs to be done and to actually go out and do it. So taking myself out of the light as leading it and letting the students lead it. So that's the first public service announcement for those who are tuned in. The Atlanta Student Coalition leaders are going to be leading their work.
And you know what? I want to take this opportunity. I don't know if there's something on the site, Jason, but we need to pass the collection plate for the ESC, because I mean, at the end of the day, and I want Aisha to get into this too, the obstacles around being a student and an activist.
That's good.
You know, but these young people need money, just like we need money to do activism, to organize and all the stuff. The young people do too. So we need to find a collection plate to pass around so they can get the bags, so they can continue to do the work, but also be students. So Aisha, if you could, first of all, Jason, we go create some kind of link or some, you know, a virtual collection plate for the young people to get the money. But Aisha, if you could talk about the hardships that come with being a student and an activist, so people can understand like the sacrifices that you're making.
Yeah,
that's
so
good.
like before students, we have like home lives, right? Like some of us are like myself are caretakers for our parents or our younger siblings, so we have that plus school plus activism. That's a lot. Like, you have to balance time. Sometimes you don't have time for yourself, and
That's
so
good.
like I remember when the day after I graduated, I went to 6 hours with my cousins because I just needed like a break. And sometimes you just have to have a break, but it's challenging. It's very challenging. Sometimes you have to sacrifice time that you would spend on your schoolwork and then stay up later doing your schoolwork. It's not easy.
All right, I have to ask you this question, and I know this is a little off to the side. Like, are you planning to run for public office in Georgia at all? Because when you're ready, I'm gonna write a check. So just
Yes,
I'm ready to drop my check.
Not right now. I really do want to. I think because public people work in public office. Some of them make money, but like you're not getting a lot of money from the office. It's like sponsors and stuff. And I really want to be a doctor. So I think maybe after I'm a doctor, I want to be an orthopedic surgeon, like and secure. I might run for office, but that's not something I want to do right now.
but let me tell you, she's already doing it because Aisha has been one of the influencers around the Atlanta Student Coalition's push for the Metro Atlanta school districts to mandate audits for individualized health plans, which are also called IHPs. And we realized that Black and brown children are impacted more by pre-existing conditions in the pandemic. And everyone is overlooking that, like, oh, we want to just go back to school and let's go back to normal and it's all good, it's all dope, right? But then we also don't realize that we're sending Black and brown children back into crowded classrooms, into crowded spaces that don't have the proper infrastructure. They haven't changed air filters. They haven't changed lead piping in the school. And so all of those things are intricate. And she, wanting and aspiring to be a doctor, has said, listen, before I go anywhere, I want to make sure that these students are being advocated for, and we're actually making sure that we are valuing these lives and not just putting up signs, right? So I wanted to shout out that even though she may not be running for office soon, she's making leeway to that and doing the work that she's doing with the ESC.
You know what though? What's interesting is that I actually wanted to run for political office at some point, right? And when I became older and really got to understanding or learning more about the political environment here in Chicago, it was such a turnoff, because I feel like, it's just so corrupt. And a lot of the elected officials here transition from public servants to politicians, in which their morals and values and ultimately service to the community becomes corrupted, right? And so it's tricky. And I was having this conversation with someone yesterday about kids going to college so young because you don't really have the opportunity to explore or invest in what you would think your passions are, to say I'm declaring this major here and I'm gonna do this later on in life. And meanwhile, while you're trying to figure that out, you're spending money. And so to feel like, at some point, maybe when you're younger, that you want to be an elected official and then you become more experienced in that space and, think about something else. So I'm saying that to say, like, I applaud Aisha for thinking about multiple career pathways.
That's good.
Because sometimes, what you think you want is not always what it is. And, I think we need to encourage our young people, or provide pathways and resources for them to explore different pathways so that they can have options with career choices.
I love that.
That's the reason why I did go into politics, because like I thought about it early on, but I thought like, okay, the politicians up to all of them are dirty. Like even like up to Obama, like everybody has their personal agenda, and I didn't want to lose myself in that way and become one of them. I thought like activism was a way to stay true to myself.
Yeah.
And get caught up in the money.
Yeah.
I want to add this though to both you all's point, that we see that everywhere though. I think that one of the major things I learned from the civil rights movement, from the failures, is that we have to have a better system of how we uplift leaders, whether they're running for political office, they're activists, they're advocates, they're educators, et cetera, so forth, because we're all advocating for some type of civil or social right in any field that we go into. One of the failures is that we weren't strong enough with coalition building. So when we put these people up, we're also lifting up a team of people with them to support them. We just lift people up. It's almost like throwing them up in the air. Like, okay, yeah, you go run for school board, and you go run for mayor, and you go run for president, and you go run to change, you know, film and production rights, and you go, you know, do this in healthcare, et cetera, so forth. And then we just throw somebody up there to fight a whole system by themselves. So I think that people can maintain that if they strategize right, and we as the people are willing to stand with them.
That's that's really good that you say that. Like I feel that, and we see it all the time. Like throw them up, and then you just expect them to survive, right? It's like the support system has to stay there in order for them to feel like they have support in order to push policy. Like it has to be there. Because everybody else that has money, and a lot of these, you know, far right, extreme politicians, like they have a whole support system underneath them. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene, hello, like that much support that someone like that would be elected, you know, and then continues to have support on like both ends from, you know, political leaders, her senior political colleagues, and then the colleagues that went in with her, and then of course the system that helped get her elected. Like it's so clear how much support they actually have.
Yeah, true.
I mean, the support is there because they want to maintain the status quo, you know.
That's right.
But I've been trying to kind of get this in, y'all, because this has been sticking with me with Aisha's earlier conversations or comments about the sacrifices that she makes as a student activist. And it was just crazy to me to hear that sometimes she has to, it's a challenge getting her own schoolwork done because she's fighting for education. Is that like?
That is, right? Can you,
right.
Yes.
And so how do y'all feel about that? Like, I know it's kind of going back to a conversation with points that we made earlier, but that's just like, it's sticking with me for some reason that younger people, our young activists are sacrificing their own, you know, academic progression to fight for education for the, you know, the majority of Black kids.
Right, which goes to show that they don't have support. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene has more support than the damn students. Like, just think about that. Like the prison system has more support, more funding. Policing in this country has more funding across the board than we're putting into education. Like that's ridiculous. Like I read something, and I'm not knocking the correctional facilities across this country, across the country that are, you know, giving inmates or captives iPads, right? So they could do whatever they need to do. Because I think that that's another way for them to help deal with the mental aspect of being incarcerated. But I'm thinking about like each iPad is like $1,100. That thing is like $1,100 for a good iPad. And then you have students, you know, during the pandemic who are doing their algebra and calculus homework on cell phones. Like that does not make any damn sense to me. You know,
access,
so like it's like we're still backwards. It's really sad.
It just tells you what they really care about.
Yeah, you're right.
They care about black and brown bodies being in prison and not making something of themselves.
And also controlling that, right?
What was the last part, Aisha?
I think they care about black and brown bodies in prison instead of being educated and making something of themselves because it keeps the status quo.
Oh yeah. Because when we were having a conversation earlier about either a teacher showing or outright telling us that we want to go be shit. Excuse my language, Aisha. You know I got a potty mouth sometimes. But I mean, when you think about it, the whole system says that to Black kids throughout their career. You know, it's like that's through divestment. That's through the school to prison pipeline. That's through inaccessibility to quality schools. And so all of that is saying like, y'all ain't gonna be shit and we gonna make sure that y'all ain't shit, right?
Yes.
And so, you know, because I was trying to think about a time where a teacher made me feel that way and it wasn't until I got to grad school, you know, but it's like when you think about it, the obstacles that you had to overcome in the K through 12 system, they've been telling us that the whole time, you know, so it's just like, we gotta change that. And so Aisha, what does in your work, in everything that you're fighting for, and hopefully those fights are successful, what does the perfect educational system look like to you as a young Black student in the future if you win all those fights? What does the perfect system look like to you?
That's good.
The perfect educational system to me would look like, for like elementary school, you have school, or K through 12, you have school choice, and you're not forced to go to school you don't want to, or take classes you don't want to. I think school is like, there's a lot of fluff that you really don't need. If I know that I don't want to be an architect, I don't need to take calculus, I don't need to take all these higher level math that's not going to benefit me, and I'm probably going to struggle in it and do bad in it anyway, it's just not going to help me. I think that you should just be able, I feel like really, you should be able to get the career you want to. So if you want to go into healthcare, then you should know that early. I think we should prepare kids earlier on to know what they want to do with their life, so that we don't have to waste all this time, all these unnecessary courses, et cetera, et cetera. But I think when you get to high school, it should be like college. Like my high school, I graduate now, so I can say which high school I went to. I went to Central Gwinnett High School in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Has academies like STEM and healthcare and all this different stuff, depending on what you want to do. And it's supposed to be like college, like a Colgate High School, but it's not, because you don't give us choice. You tell us when to go to school, when to go to class, how to get to class. You only let us use the bathrooms. We want to use the bathroom. Like in college, it's not like that. You choose your schedule, do what you want to do. There should be more freedom, more flexibility. Yeah. And I think that would be the ideal school system.
Yeah.
Aren't there countries that do that though? Like I think
there are.
That's why I think it's so crazy that we can't, because there's countries in Europe that do it, and their excuses, oh well, it's a homogeneous country, and they don't have to deal with racism, et cetera, et cetera. That's not an excuse. We have the money, so why you just don't want to do it?
Yeah, that's it. They don't want to make the change, to do it. I mean, that's critically important.
I mean, but when you think about it, when we talk about, again, the school to prison pipeline and how the school system is set up anyway, young people got to wear uniforms. You got to line up to go.
It sounds like prison.
Yeah, they tell you when to go to the bathroom. They tell you when to eat. When you come in, you walking through metal detectors. You have police presence in school. So that's why they setting you up for a life, ultimately a future in being incarcerated.
Yeah, and we spend more money. Yeah, we spend more money on resource officers. So you got to think, in Gwinnett County, where Aisha is at, Atlanta Public Schools, like it's over $2 million of funds that's being set aside for school resource officers. And I always give that fact every time that we have conversations around how we reimagine schools, because what statement are we telling parents and students where we as a public school entity are spending more money on resource police officers to police children in schools than we are for mental health resources for them, or for counselors, and this is the other caveat, Black and brown parents who have children in public schools, do you have a full-time nurse in your school? How are these kids supposed to be going back to school post-pandemic, and we don't have certified nurse practitioners in every school? We don't have a counselor for every grade level. We don't have a social worker for every school. Like, that's crazy.
Right. And I'm like, what about, like, okay, so we have 1,000 kids in one school and then we got 1 or 2 nurses. Like, we're already stretching that nurse out. You know what I mean? Like,
and then sometimes the nurse, you go to the nurse offices, the nurse isn't even there. The nurse has an attitude and doesn't want to deal with you.
Yeah.
So you're not even getting the care you need.
Or doesn't believe you because you're Black.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like that.
Yeah. All those things. Right. Wow. Yeah.
And then also think about like the gap, and students coming in from, underserved school districts like I did. Like I went from DC public schools to Fairfax County, and I instantly knew that I was behind. Instead of investing all of this money into, patrolling and policing the students, why not give Nehemiah a tutor? Little Nehemiah, right. Or somebody like that, like, so he can catch up and be able to, have a chance to do some IB and AP classes later.
As Gen Z would say, if you're racist, just say that.
Right. And we can adjust to it, but people don't want to really build solutions. We've been seeing a lot of conversations, especially, and it's not just Atlanta, it's a lot of major cities across the nation that are having major races for who's going to be the next mayor, who's going to be the city council members. The ESC did a lot of research around, elections, and people do not vote for their school board, although the education tax is the highest tax that we pay. Another point is that look at all of these people that are running for office. Everyone is harping on crime that is targeting Black and brown youth. but what are their solutions? If their solution is just adding more police officers and, you know, cracking down on crime by making sure we have more of a police presence, then that tells you right there that they don't have an investment in families and communities, because these youth need help. They don't need to be in prison. But, you know, we don't want to go through that part of education with voting. We just want to get people out to vote and say, let's get somebody in because they blue or red. And we're not looking at someone that's really going to be impacting policy that's changing crime and poverty and homelessness, et cetera, and so forth.
I have a question for everybody.
Go
ahead, Tanisha, because I see
we got a few more minutes, so we got a few public service announcements. So the first one is share this out, y'all. As always, we need y'all to share this out. The second one is while we had Deacon Allen on his soapbox, I want to pull you back up here because I think it's time, if you're ready, I think it's time for the TDRS family that's watching to catch the tea, the special announcement that we talked about. So the floor is yours, bro.
Awesome. Well, I'll continue the conversation with what Aisha has been saying. Generation Z, our young people want to see something different. You know, as I'm getting my master's in special education, a lot of the research lacks solutions around what can be done for better educational outcomes for Black and brown children. A lot of that begins with policy. It begins with engagement and how we're connecting people to different platforms with their perspectives and also their resources. And so we believe that common sense practices can be made in our public education systems. And so actually from the inspiration of my family members who are educators, my ancestors, and these amazing students that I've had the honor of leading and working with over the last year or so now, I have officially decided to run for school board here in the city of Atlanta for seat 9. And I'm excited because it's time for change. Our students should not have to wait. We've been having conversations long enough. And so I think, this is an opportunity to, again, alleviate the problems that we're seeing and really put in solutions that work for our kids in this generation. So that's my major announcement on today. Stay tuned to my personal pages where we'll be sharing information about our website and what's next. It will definitely be done in conjunction with Juneteenth, because I would not be here. I wouldn't be an educator if it was not for my ancestors who were descendants of slaves that I had the opportunity to know and be around. And they taught me the importance of, the fundamentals of reading, the fundamentals of respecting everyone for who they are, and most importantly, for doing the right thing for those who the least are among us, which are our children and our seniors. And so we'll be making a couple of announcements and information throughout the week in honor of Juneteenth, in honor of our ancestors who did not get a chance to see the equity in education and economics that we're talking about right now.
Reaction.
My God. We all saw this coming, right? We were like, oh, he's gonna run for school board. I'm like, it's gonna happen. But yes, bro, we got your support. You got our endorsement, you have our support, our financial support, you have the support of our feet in fists when we knocking on these doors in this hot Georgia, Atlanta. Time. Like we're in this with you. So congratulations. I can't wait to see you change the school system.
I'm excited. I appreciate that. And I'll be putting everybody to work. Let me tell you, I really want this to be something different. We have an engagement problem. That data resonated with me. The fact that as adults, we are not invested in education. And so we should have more than 758, almost 5,000 people across the city that are voting in the school board election. And there are millions of people in the city of Atlanta, millions. And so we only have about 5,000 people that are actively engaged in what's happening in our public education system. And that's not good enough. That's not giving me Atlanta, the home of the civil rights movement, a mecca for people to come and get better educational and economic opportunities. And so, like the NAACP would say back in the day, don't just talk about it, be about it. And I'm old school mixed with a little new school. So yeah, we're definitely going to be about it.
Whoa, bro. So, let me get this straight. So how many people voted in the last school board race in Atlanta?
So for the seat that I'm running in, there were about 5,000, 370 people who voted in the election, but there have not been a lot of people that have turned out. In the district that I grew up in, the district that Councilman Brown, who's been on our show and has done a lot with the ESC, the district that he leads, it had less than 500 people that came out and voted. And this was a district that was hit heaviest by the cheating scandal. And so when I look at all of these numbers, I'm like, wait a minute, I've taught hundreds of students in the city of Atlanta. So I know there are more families that are out here. I'm an alumni of Douglas High School. Shout out to the Doug family. Keisha Lansbottom, who is the mayor. She also graduated from Douglas, who's behind me on my wall. We're very active. A lot of our alumni associations that still have family members, grandchildren, children in the district, but people are not getting out to vote. Now, everybody's going to vote for the mayor and city council, but then everybody is also complaining about, these water boys and all these youth are going out to Atlantic Station and stealing things. And it's always around them stealing things and their aggressive behaviors and them being misunderstood. Well, who's talking to them, right? Like, no one's taking the time to talk to them. And then when we go out and talk to them and say, hey guys, here's what they're saying, people are like, we don't want to hear that. And so we're going to actually make them hear it, because people need to know that we are lacking educational outcomes for our kids that we need.
But Jay, can I jump in with a quick PSA and like my thoughts on it? And this is family. This is why it's important for y'all to share this conversation now, because this is activism.
Yes.
And people don't, this is the activism that goes unseen. Jason is making systemic change. It's not just about marching and protesting and stuff like that. It's infiltrating these systems and changing. And that's what Jason is doing. And so that's why it's important to share this broadcast. And it's important to really share examples of true activism, because everybody needs to get behind this and support him and support anybody else that's in other cities trying to make this systemic change. Because if we're talking about voting outcomes and engagement in Black communities, and we're talking about we want change, but we don't support the people that's trying to make the change at these tables and in these seats, then that's contradictory to what we're talking about. So we don't really want that. And so again, make sure y'all share this out. Make sure y'all support Jason. Make sure y'all support other Black leaders, our young people especially, that's out here trying to infiltrate and ultimately destroy these systems and rebuild them for our communities, because that's the work that's needed. So that's my little piece that I want to share. I'm so proud of you, brother. Like, you doing the work all the time as always, and you doing it hard and you doing it strong. So I love you for it, and I appreciate you. You know, I'm supporting. If I got to walk to Atlanta and beat on doors, I got you. But we're not gonna, we'll get you down here, but we don't want you to walk to Atlanta. Because I'm not gonna walk to Atlanta because
that ain't gonna happen, right?
Before you get there, though.
What'd you say?
I said you might sweat to death before you get to his house.
Right. I do want to add this, that, it's important that we re-engage people in different ways. And so I want people who, have kids in the system who have never voted before. Those are the people that I want to reach. I want them to be engaged in this process. I don't want it to be he's putting on a suit and he's coming out here to be with us and, let me come to this event and let me take this picture. And it's time out for that. I'm tired of pictures. I'm tired of seeing people, carouse and cozy up and all that jazz, because that's the old system. That's what they did. I need to actually sit down with you and figure out what is the problem. What are you seeing? What's happening? Because if we're not fixing policies around that, then we're just, doing the same old thing. I'm tired of doing the same old thing. And I know that we can do it. And so with this generation, combined with all of the other generations, right, it's going to take all of us to come together to do this. So stay connected to my Facebook page. On Twitter, as you see across the screen, at JB Allen 5. Like some of my young students would say, J Ballin, which is so funny to me. But check us out on Twitter and Facebook. We'll be putting out ways that you can get connected, ways that you can donate, because we are going to need your donations. And I do not have a problem with asking for money, because we're going to need that to reach the people who we have overlooked for so long.
Yes, bad. All right, y'all, we got about a minute left. Let's close out with final thoughts.
I just want to say to all the young people out there, the students, this is your if you're waiting for a sign to start being activists and start making change. This is your sign. Do it now. Don't be afraid to make good trouble. And students shall lead the way.
I love it.
Yes. Neo, you got something?
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything that Miss Aisha said. Like, students, they shall lead the way. The Bible even talks about that, right?
Right.
And so I just want to say, Aisha, I'm proud of you. I cannot wait to see what you do in the next 10 years. I'm sure at some point in this country's future, people are going to know who you are all across this country because, you know, you're a light in this darkness that we're, I don't want to say that we're quite coming out of it, but I mean, it's nice to have what we have now than what we had the last 4 years in the White House. So definitely thankful for Jason and the work that you're doing in Atlanta. As I mentioned before, I cannot wait to, you know, I'm definitely going to be looking at my checkbook to write to send y'all a check so y'all can be able to, you know, get these signs and all of that. I know it takes work, it takes money. So we have to put our money where our mouth is. If we're really about, you know, disrupting the system, it's going to take financial resources to do that. And
that's right.
To the people that have a good track record, Jason has a good track record. Aisha has a great track record as well. And these are people that you know can trust are going to do the right thing with the financial resources. Proud of y'all.
Most definitely. I appreciate that. I do have one more. I was going to close out and, you know, as we give our last little shout out. So Aisha Magazine, my cousins in California, they've been on Atlanta with the ESC. This magazine is designed, led. The editor is my baby cousin, all Black female youth, Black and brown, who are doing this work. And I wanted to shout out them because we're connecting. The ESC is connected with people all across the nation in regards to helping students uplift their voices. And so again, shout out to all of the activists, educators, and leaders who are making spaces for our young people to say, hey, this is who we are, this is who we're going to be. And again, stay connected to what we're going to be putting out this week.
Well, y'all, I don't have much. I just want to say, little sis Aisha, I'm so proud of you. Like every day you make me proud. I've never met you in person, but I feel like I have. So keep doing the good work. When I get paid tomorrow, I'm definitely putting on your Cash App. And I just want to say, I just put in the chat, it's a lot of PPP loans floating around here. If y'all don't put some of that money on my brother campaign, we go fight. Y'all stop. Y'all can buy a belt, put on for this board member seat. But with that, we go head out, y'all. It's been another TDRS. Y'all, again, make sure y'all support Jason's campaign. Make sure y'all support Aisha and the young people around the country doing the work. Y'all make sure y'all support Black Wall Street Times. Y'all make sure y'all get out there and do the work yourselves. But until then, we'll see y'all next week. Have a great Juneteenth. And we love y'all.